Hello. Do you want the stand? Or are you going to hold your microphone? Okay, I will put it to one side so everyone can see you. Wonderful you. Hiya, welcome to Book Fringe. If you are in the other room and you are curious at any point to wander through, join us. And to everyone watching online, welcome. My name is Myri. I run Lighthouse, and today I am introducing the wonderful Rosie Day, who is an author and playwright. She was named a Star of Tomorrow by Screen Daily and a future trailblazer by Red Magazine. Her debut play, Instructions for a Teenage Armageddon, opened in the West End in spring 2024, and her debut non-fiction title of the same name was published by Hachette. Her sophomore play, This Is Not a Happy Room, opened in spring 2025 at the King's Head Theatre. Her first novel, Vipers, was published by Serpent's Tail, and she is currently writing an audio original for Audible. As an actor, Rosie's credits include Outlander, All Roads Lead to Rome, Down a Dark Hall, Good Omens, Living the Dream, and many more. Rosie's training to be a psychotherapist, was in London with her 3 cats, and today is with us to talk about I Think I Like Girls. Will you put your hands together to welcome Rosie?
Thank you. That is so weird when somebody reads that. What do you do with your face? I don't know what you're meant to do. It's very, very strange. Thank you for coming. This is such a kind of surreal thing. I've never done one before where it's just me talking. I kind of usually have someone asking questions. So I was just saying to the gang back there, like, if you have any questions or anything that comes to you, like, while I'm talking, please put your hand up, and it can be like more of like a conversation-y thing rather than me monologuing, because as much as like I really want to be Mel Robbins and really, like, talk in that way, I don't think I'm quite there yet, really. But yeah, this is I Think I Like Girls, which is a book that I wrote. It's actually really strange to be back in Edinburgh, because I kind of came to this like writing journey from kind of acting because I went to Edinburgh about 7 years ago, and I saw a play by this amazing writer called Millie Thomas, who wrote a play called Dust that was on here, and I went to see it and was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I wonder if I could write a kind of one girl play, essentially. So it's very, very strange kind of 7 years later to be back kind of in Edinburgh, this time kind of like having written myself. So it kind of was like a weird full circle moment. But none of my plays kind of capture my experience of kind of queerness and what it is kind of to be a gay woman and kind of discovering yourself. And that's kind of, I wrote this book purely because I kind of came to the realization that I was gay when I was about 18, and then kind of really hid it and suppressed it and kind of really knuckled down to kind of heteronormativity. Was like, I'm going to find a husband and a picket white fence and have 2 of our children and do all those things. So eventually it got to the point where I was like, I don't think I can do this. I actually think it's making me really, really ill. I was in a relationship with a man that was like really abusive and really awful, and I was like, oh my god, I'm going to end up marrying him, and I'm never going to end up like exploring the thing that I know that I really want, which is to date women, essentially. And then kind of when I came to this realization, I was like, I have no idea where to start. Like, there were some TV shows and some films and some things, you know, where the gay women were kind of like the quirky best friend, but I was like, where do I turn to kind of figure this out? I wasn't, despite being an actor, growing up in the kind of, I think there's a misconception that like the entertainment industry is like so inclusive, and I would say it really is for gay men, but for like gay women, I couldn't sit and list you kind of really successful gay actresses. There's a couple in America, like Sarah Paulson's our queen, but like I couldn't sit and like give you like a, you know, like, and I was like, so who am I turning to? And you know, Saran Jones was doing like the Lord's work of playing all the gay women, but like I was like, I need somebody. And kind of there wasn't the resources that I kind of needed at that time. And so then kind of as I went on my journey of it, when I was kind of about 25 was when I kind of came out, I was like, oh, maybe you should write kind of what you've learned. And that's not saying by any stretch of imagination, we would just say, I'm not an expert on this. It's like the caveat is like, you can kind of give advice, but like, it's like, do as I say, not as I do, because in real life kind of, we're all, I think, kind of like, just making it up as we go kind of along. But kind of what was so interesting to me was kind of like it was like such a simple question of like, how do you get a girlfriend, which should be like such an easy thing, like, oh, you just go on the apps, or you just, you know, it can be so simple, but like it felt like the most difficult thing in the world to kind of be like, okay, how do I start this journey? And I kind of very, very luckily and very, very privilegedly was in therapy, so I could actually do work in terms of like at first I had to actually come out to my therapist because I was with her for a while before I actually kind of got to that place, and then kind of start dismantling kind of all the ideas and internalized homophobia, which I didn't know I had. I wasn't aware of it, but like I actually had like so much self-hatred for the fact that I was gay and that I wasn't going to have the life that I grew up as a little girl thinking I was going to have. And so I had to kind of do all this work to kind of unpick the feelings around it, and kind of a lot of that through training to become a psychotherapist, which is a wild thing to do. I think everyone should go to psychotherapy school. It's like mad. I go to a very experiential, we do everything kind of by learning, so it's a lot of kind of like emotional processing, and kind of you could write a comedy TV show about the exercises that they make us do, like so we have to talk to chairs, and it's all very it's quite intense, but like through doing that I was like, oh okay, this is kind of how I can kind of find my way through it, and a lot of it has ended up in, rightly or wrongly, having not qualified yet, has ended up in the book, but it draws from a lot of people like Gabor Mate, Esther Perel, who's a leading relationship therapist, Mel Robbins is actually in there, and it's all about, there's a lot of work in the book which is about kind of finding yourself first before you go out into the world and kind of start dating, which is also something I hadn't done because I was one of those people that kind of dated a bit as a teenager, then got myself into a long-term relationship, kind of came out being like, oh, okay, I'm not quite sure, I don't quite know who I am, and I think that's such an important thing to kind of figure out, like, your wants and needs and things before you kind of enter into a relationship with someone else. I don't believe in the concept, I had really low self-esteem, and I don't believe in the concept that, oh, you have to, like, love yourself before you can love someone else, or before someone else can love you. I think that's total crap. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. But, like, it's a thing of just kind of figuring out what I wanted and being able, if I could give somebody in their 20s, like, one piece of advice, like, be on your own for a few years, because you need to figure out kind of what you want, and kind of was kind of the journey of this book, and it literally takes you through everything from kind of your very first thought, the exploration of like girl crushes, because at first when I was kind of thinking like, oh, I know there's women I'm attracted to, but I was really confused as to whether like I wanted to either be them, be adopted by them, or date them, and I was really unsure. Like the lines were so blurred, like do I just want her outfit or do I want to go to bed with her? I actually don't know. And kind of like exploring that, and then kind of the dating, and kind of how to date healthily, and what do you look for in a good relationship, what's like the questions you need to be asking somebody, and then like how do you maintain a healthy relationship, and kind of how do you, like there's a lot of stuff about like repairing, and kind of I think people have this idea that if you're in a relationship then you shouldn't argue, and it should be like this kind of blissful rom-com style thing, and actually like it's like how do you have the healthy conversations, how do you have the arguments, and most importantly how do you repair when there like is a rupture. My favourite chapter in the book is actually about how to break up with somebody nicely, and like I write about the fact that some people do deserve to have their clothes thrown out of the window onto the street, absolutely, but if it's just a relationship that you don't want to kind of be in anymore, like how do you end in a way that it means that neither one comes away kind of damaged, and how can you kind of do that as honestly as possible? So it kind of accidentally turned into kind of a book on like good relationships, which as someone who's not been in a lot of good relationships was kind of like hilarious, and my friends were like, I'm not sure you're the person to write this, but through kind of the therapeutic lens and kind of the research that I'd done. And what was so wonderful about the book was getting to speak to so many amazing queer women and their experiences, and I think everyone comes from such different experiences, but also you all kind of have this same almost internal narrative and experience of what it is to have come to being a gay woman, and kind of the feelings around it. And I have a very wonderful friend called Ellen Jones who's got an amazing book called Outrage, and she came out when she was 14, and she's amazing, and she's like my queer lesbian like hero with purple hair, but like she's so confident, she's so kick-ass, but she still holds all the same feelings that I do around kind of like the anxiety and kind of what her experience was with it. So I think when you speak to people, you kind of have this kind of universal thing, and then you don't, there are people that just come out and are like, this is amazing and great and brilliant, but I wish I could be one of those people. But I think you always kind of, for me it's always like with any kind of emotion, that I always say like both and, like I can have so much joy in being gay, and I can still have the thing of like, okay, well now I face a really big thing for me is the fact that I've known since I was a tiny little girl that I want to have kids, and there is something about the fact that I found it really hard that I was like never going to accidentally get pregnant. Like I was never going to have that moment of like running to the shop and getting the pregnancy test and being like, oh my god, and the fact that my children are going to cost money, like I'm going to have to, and that's an expense, and
as a writer, as much like a therapist, and then you kind of, I had all these feelings of like, this feels so unfair, it's the only thing I've ever known that I've wanted, and my life is now harder because of it, and kind of the prejudice around that and the process of it. So it's kind of being able to kind of hold everything really, and it kind of looks at, we also look kind of the IVF process, the marriage process. I personally was someone that's like, not against, but just in general, like I don't want to get married because I'm like, God, I don't want to belong to anybody. But it's like we look at kind of all the different options. It is like a guide of like A to B. If you want to be in a relationship with a woman, this is kind of how you do it in a kind of healthy way, and hopefully in a really, really mindful way. There's a lot of therapy exercises, there's a lot of mindfulness, there's a lot of processes like radical acceptance and kind of things to kind of make you feel really good. But the whole book is kind of set around the idea that each chapter is my diary entries, which I now regret doing wholeheartedly. Like, actually, this is great. And like, why have I written something? This is really personal. What have I done? And that's definitely a line that I've not walked particularly. I've learned through having only written fictional stories or plays. This is the first one I've written as me, and it's incredibly vulnerable. I'm not sure I've walked the line particularly cleverly. There is one thing actually that caused an argument between me and a friend in there about a girl crush that I had on them, and I kind of forgot to tell them about it. So I thought I would tell my friend that I had a girl crush, like that I fancied them, by giving them the book. And I kind of handed them and was like, have this, have a nice time, bye. And she was like, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, will you try telling your friend that you kind of in love with them? Like, so instead I decided to put it in a book, and she's like, that's so dramatic and so you to do that rather than just have a conversation. But I think that's there's a lot of kind of diary entries. There's a lot of not a lot of, but there's quite a few triggering subjects. I had an eating disorder for like a really long time, which actually through research I've learned that there's a big connection between the LGBTQIA community and eating disorders, which I wasn't really aware of. I knew with men there was, because obviously that side of the community, a lot of it is really kind of body image based, but with girls actually, and when people there's a whole kind of turning everything down or inwards and kind of can end up in kind of an eating disorder situation. So there's kind of that's covered within the book, as is kind of the abuse. One of the things that I had to kind of fight really hard for in the book, not with my editor, but with whenever you do a book like this, there's a legal read to it. So you have to kind of get the lawyers in and make sure the publisher isn't going to get sued. And there's a whole chapter about recognising abuse and kind of what to do if you're in an abusive relationship and how to get out of it. And that was something that I had to fight really hard for, because there were so many things that they were like, no, we have to take this out because you're going to get sued if you write about that. So I'd say about 50% of my experience ended up in it, but lots of it kind of went. But that was such an important thing, because I didn't know that the book opened when I had just broken up with my ex, and I didn't know until I went to therapy that what was happening to me classified as abuse. Like, to me, I was kind of brought up with the notion that an abusive relationship is somebody hitting me or being physically violent, and I didn't know anything about coercive control, emotional abuse, financial abuse, like any of that kind of world. Threatening behaviour, like destroying your property or kind of destroying objects. And so that was so important for me to teach the women and young girls that you might pick it up, like these are the signs, and it is just as common in LGBTQIA plus communities and relationships, which again I kind of hadn't really considered, because in my head, coming from the background that I do, it's like I thought that it was men that were kind of the perpetrators, but actually, in female-female relationships, it can be the same. So that was kind of really important to include in there. And it talks about abuse. It talks about sexual abuse as well. I don't think as a woman you can write a book kind of about your sexual experience kind of without talking about sexual harassment, sexual abuse, most people. I know everyone I know has a story in some kind of realm. Every woman has had some kind of experience, and so that was really important to kind of include. Again, was a bit of a fight of being like taking out all the kind of, obviously I didn't name the men, but any identifying thing that kind of would ever, bring it back to them kind of had to go. So I would say the book, it's very dark and it's in places, but also kind of it's meant to be like a kind of shining beacon of hope if you want to kind of get from A to B, really. And it's also weird because I've written it, and yet myself, I'm still in a place of kind of trying to get to B. So it's kind of like, it's almost like I've written the book for my younger self, but also for my current self to be like, quite often my therapist will be like, like you've written the book, like if you know what to do, it's in the book. And they were like, yeah, but it doesn't really feel like that. But I was really nervous when the book came out. I was like, I've not got a girlfriend, it's not legit. Like I need to have, I was really like, I want to have a girlfriend when the book came out, but unfortunately that wasn't the way. But I did re-download Hinge on publication day. I was like, no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to find a girlfriend. And actually what was really, really funny was about 2 weeks ago, I matched with a girl on Hinge who went, oh my god, I just read your book. And reading the book made me re-download Hinge. And I was like, yes! And I matched with her just because of that. I was like, yes, tell me more. So that's kind of the gist of it. And it's like complicated and hard, and it's like a lifelong process. And I kind of say in it, the book, that like, it's called I Think I Like Girls. I am 95% certain that I will end up with a woman, but also like, you know, as evolving creatures when I'm 60, who knows what's gonna happen and where I'm gonna be, and kind of this is kind of very much like a current point of my life and something that I struggle with, and I think this is a conversation topic that varies from person to person, that I really struggled with kind of labelling and kind of knowing where I fit within kind of the scheme of things. And for me, labelling was always like a way for other people to understand where I was at, rather than kind of me who was just like, Dobby's a free elf, like I'm just like living my best life. But there's a big chapter kind of on identity, which like is a whole encyclopedia of in itself. Like when someone goes, what's your identity? Like I was like, I don't know. Like sometimes it's actually you have to do those stupid games where it's like describe yourself in 3 words or something. And I'm like, I've got nothing other than the fact that I really love Taylor Swift. Like that's what I know about myself, let alone like my sexual identity. And I go back and forth, like, and actually what was really lovely is that gay was always something I was like, okay, I'm really comfortable with gay. Lesbian was comfortable, but wasn't quite sure. Queer never felt quite right. And then actually through publishing this book, I'm now like, oh no, I'm queer. Like that's the one that I kind of most identify with now. But I think it's kind of like a lifelong thing, and you know, everyone that writes kind of, I think, books in these veins, especially psychotherapists, like no one's actually got their shit together, I don't think. We're just kind of imparting wisdom. Most of it is stuff that's kind of like passed down to us, that we're like, oh, this is what I've learned, and kind of that was always really important to kind of just create something for women, and all of my work is kind of for young women or women generally, and kind of like how can we empower people, and this is kind of the thing of like when you don't know where to go, maybe you could turn there and it might kind of help you along the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the book in a nutshell.
There are some questions online, and if you guys have anything, throw a hand up. But if I could abuse my privilege as the host and have the first question.
Please.
I love the opening. You have a phenomenal opening sentence to the book that kind of situates how recently sapphic love and queerness has still been aberrant and like or seen as madness, and so much of how we operate within like patriarchy and capitalism and all these things that show up in the book. And yet we also live in a moment where it feels like a book that is as simple as exploring what it is to like girls and like trying to impart advice on like what that might be is sort of seen as frivolous, or well, we've got that already, or we've got the internet already. And I wonder how you navigated coming to the conclusion to write this particular book in this moment, and how people have received it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So the opening line of the book is, before doing anything in life, I like to think, is this something that would have got me institutionalized in the 19th century? If the answer is yes, then I'm on the right track. That's like, and that's not the book, that's just my life in general. It's like, well, let's get me in trouble. Probably yes. One of my favorite things to do is to read. You've read like the Victorian things of like why women were institutionalized, like falling off a horse, and like it's excellent. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think what I was looking for when I was trying to find research and context for myself in order to kind of go on this journey was like another woman's story, really. And I think there was a lot of like resources, a lot of kind of like textbook kind of things, but I really wanted to kind of have something that felt kind of really emotional and really real, and kind of really like almost like you're kind of, I say like you're on a road trip and you're driving the car, but like I'm beside you and we're like listening to Dolly Parton and having a laugh, and like we're just going to try and figure it out, and maybe there'll be a hot woman at the end of it. Like that was kind of the basis of the book, because obviously there are, and also there's so many people that, you know, have been gay for so much longer than me that have written books, and this is very much like, if this is the start of your journey, you're questioning, like, this is kind of a place where you can land, because for me, I think it's that, like, the initial thing of, like, where do I go to in this moment? And I didn't kind of have that, and this book actually kind of came about because my agent was speaking to an editor who was looking for a book kind of about this, essentially, and my agent kind of came to me and was like, well, you're gay, and I was like, do you want to write this? And I was like, oh my god, like, yeah, this is exactly what I would love to kind of do that, and kind of, it was, and also, like, it was, like I said, it's kind of as much, it really helped me as, like, whilst I was writing it, kind of figure out my journey and kind of my destination. And I think what's really personal is often really universal in kind of work like this. And yeah, I mean, I might regret writing the diary entries now, but, you know, it's too late, it's already a print. Yeah. Yeah, I do, and it's that's a really interesting one for me, because something that when I first kind of started exploring, I was like, oh, I'm bisexual. That was kind of what I was convinced I was, and then kind of as my journey went on, I was like, oh no, I think I'm actually gay. But a question I asked, which is slightly a controversial one, is that because I've had a really difficult time with men throughout my life and been in lots of abusive situations, I sometimes go, if I hadn't had those situations with men, would I be bisexual? Would I be more willing to, and more open to kind of exploring that side? And whereas for me, because of kind of stuff happened, I've kind of cut that off in a way. So it's definitely something, and you know, there are still times now where, who was it the other day that I was like, oh, he's really hot. Like, I have eyes. So like, I definitely like, you know, there are things I'm like, oh no, you are really attractive. But I think for me, where my sexuality comes from is, it's more like, do I want to, like, I can see a man and be like, oh, he's hot and fancy them a bit, but it's like, who do I want to be with? Who do I want my life partner to be? Who do I want to share my world with? And I know, for me, that's women. But it was definitely a thing for me of, like, how do we, like, I can't get rid of 50% of the population as much as sometimes I wanted to. So that was kind of like, yeah, it definitely crosses my mind. I'm annoyed now, I can't remember who was the person that I was like, oh god, they're so fit, that I found the other day. But yeah, there was a guy in the pool on holiday, and I was like, he's beautiful. Like, he's a beautiful man, and I can appreciate that. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a question online, which was, what piece of advice did you come to through writing the book that you're most excited or glad to share?
Gosh. Other than the how to break up with somebody properly, those 10 tips, which I think are, which I'm like, yay, no one's going to hurt each other anymore if they read this book, which is totally not true. Probably, gosh. Probably there's a load of, I mean, it's a known thing, so it's not so much like it's mine, but at all. But there's a load of inner child work within the book of, like, and that for me on my journey was so important to, like, go back and get the 6-year-old that was absolutely terrified, who was sat alone on her bed, and kind of how much that has helped me and kind of my needs and my behaviours in my, like, current life, to know that there's, like, a little version of me that needs certain things, and it's okay to give that person, to give her the things that she needs, and make her as safe as possible. So that kind of process is a whole chapter on inner child work. That's probably the thing that I'm most excited to share, because it's honestly the thing that has revolutionised my life the most.
I have another question. You write in the book, the hardest thing is being both gay and a woman. And obviously gender and desirability, as you explore in the book, they're racialized, they're shaped by capitalism, they're so shaped by patriarchy and the male gaze. And I wonder how you explore Can you tell us a bit about like what it is to explore being desirable or wanting to be desired, or what you desire, and what it is to be a woman who likes women and therefore doesn't want to operate under those umbrellas?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's certainly like a thing I'm doing at school right now. I'm doing a project over the summer holidays that I've turned in on sexism and misogyny. So it kind of ties in actually with what we're kind of looking at, and we just realised, I was sat with my friend who I was doing it with, and I realised the other day I went and got Botox for the first time, and I was like, I came out of the appointment and was like, oh my god, I fucked everything up. I am a bad feminist. I need to go to hell. Like, what have I done? I've fallen foul of the patriarchy. And it's so true, like the idea. But what's so lovely about, I think, seeing life through the eyes of a woman who fancies a woman rather than in kind of the male gaze is that there's so much kind of like more emotional resonance and things that I notice about people that when I was kind of living my life through